Welcome to Wellness in Today's World, a space where we discuss the latest insights in psychology, wellness, and everything in between. Hello, I'm Debra Kawahara. Thank you for joining us today. Today's guest is someone who has not only shaped the field of psychology, but reshaped how we think about disability, identity, and inclusion. Dr. Rhoda Olkin is a clinical psychologist, professor, author, and trailblazer whose work has illuminated the lived experiences of people with disabilities in ways that are both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. Dr. Oken, it is an honor to have you here today. Let's begin with your story and how you kind of found your path to psychology and how your own experience with disability shaped your career.
Thank you, Deborah. So I had polio when I was 1, about a year before the vaccine became available. Yes, I'm that old. And so I have no pre-disability, post-disability. I just have me and my identity as a disabled person. And my disability has changed, of course, as I've aged. I used to wear a brace, then I went to no brace but crutches, and now I'm a wheelchair user. And I went to psychology pretty early on, I would say during high school. And my goal originally was to change the world, and I realized that was a little large. And then it was to change psychology, and that was still a little big. And so I really have concentrated on who are the students I'm training to be clinical psychologists, and what can I put out there in my books that can help clinical psychology, counseling psychology, other kinds of therapists work with clients with disabilities. Given that we're about 20% of the population, I really wanted to infuse more disability into clinical training.
So really a call to the profession to help
Absolutely.
students and those working in mental health be better, competent in working with people with
Yes.
disabilities. Was there any pivotal moment or mentor that helped you form, I guess, your voice around these issues and being able to advocate in the way that you have been able to?
I think there was many pivotal moments, but one stands out to me because at first I didn't want to be the psychologist who just did disability things. And at some point, I realized if I don't do this, there are a lot of people who will never know about these things. And who else is going to do this? And because I'm an insider, I wanted an insider to do it. As it happens, there are 3 people who also had polio who were very, very visible in disability issues. One was Judy Heumann, and she became the director of NIDR, the National Institute on Disability Research, and Paul Longmore, who was a historian at San Francisco State, and then Ed Roberts, who was the first person at UC Berkeley with severe disabilities, who was first housed in a hospital, and then he sued to be in a dorm along with other students and became the head of the Department of Rehab. So I watched these contemporaries of mine go to important positions. And I went to a conference of the Society of Disability Studies, and I met Paul Longmore, the one from San Francisco State. And he was just so out there, such an advocate, and so welcoming of me that I thought, oh, I want to do what he's doing. He's affecting students. He's writing. Let me see what I can do. And that led me towards the idea that maybe I had a book in me, that it wasn't just gas or indigestion, that maybe it really was a book. And then Alliant very nicely gave me a sabbatical so I could explore that. And I think putting it down on paper opened me as well as told me I have something to say as an insider in disability.
Wow. Wow. So it was really those experiences informing your work, and wanting to share from those experiences into professional work.
Yes, the marriage of the personal and the professional.
Yeah, for sure. And it just seems like because your path connected you with people that were doing the kind of work that you wanted to do, it allowed you then to say, hey, I want to do that as well.
Yes.
So the role modeling and mentoring that you got from your contemporaries.
Yes, which I think we know is what most minoritized people need is some kind of mentor within their own group.
So, you know, you had the support, but I also am going to ask you about any challenges or tribulations that you had to go through as a psychologist in training with a disability, because I know you're still even a strong voice in terms of what needs to be done.
Yeah. And you talk about it like it's the past tense, but it's not the past tense. There are still
Yeah.
very much trials and tribulations. I think a big one is that some supervisors kept insisting that it was going to be a problem for my clients.
Mm,
And when they said questions like, "How do you talk about this with your clients?" or "Tell me how it comes up for your clients." If I say it really isn't an issue, it makes it sound like I'm in denial, and there's sort of no way out of that conversation without sounding defensive. The
yeah.
truth is, what I have found in my clinical work is clients make an assumption about me that is actually really helpful. They look at me and they think, "Oh, she has suffered. She is going to understand my suffering." And it sort of helps that therapeutic alliance. And they think, "I'm going to understand them." It is supervisors who have always insisted that it was a problem. The other problem was that I came up before there were laws
Mm,
protecting me. So, starting from undergraduate, I trained the University of Oregon. I then trained Stanford University. And then I went to graduate school at UC Santa Barbara and I had to train them.
mm,
And then I had my first job at Sacramento State and I started from scratch. So when I came to Alliant, I was tired of
mm,
training universities. And yet there was no curb cut where faculty parked. There was a curb cut where students parked. The assumption being that students have disabilities, professors don't.
mm,
There was a two-story building with no elevator. It
mm,
was a favor for people to bring me my mail from the second floor. So every year I took one issue to fight. Obviously, the elevator was the big one. Then it was a curb cut, then it was a parking spot, then it was an automatic door opener, then it was a door opener to the bathroom, and then we moved to San Francisco, the campus moved. And I met the president of the university in the elevator, and I said to him, "I'm not coming back until you figure out where I'm gonna park." It has been an ongoing issue everywhere. And one of the curious things about disability, when I enter a room in my wheelchair, I am highly visible.
mhm,
There's another way in which disability is invisible, which is that if I'm not in the room, no one's thinking about it. I've been at Alliant for 35 years. Still, when I go into a meeting, nobody's pulled out a chair, so there's a place for me to go into the table. It's as if until I'm there, nobody thinks, what is the access into this room? It's small things like that.
mhm,
Those are the biggest work challenges, which is that it feels like it's a constant uphill battle. And I don't mean to just point to Alliant. I think that we will find that if I talk to other people with disabilities, they will all say the same thing. The other big challenge, and I think again it's true for anyone with a disability that's visible to other people, is there's a kind of loss of boundaries such that people feel free to ask me questions and say things to me. So one of the things that happens really often is people want me to know how comfortable they are with my disability. And they do that by making a joke that everyone else has made, like, "Don't run me over," or "You're going to get a speeding ticket," or "Gee, I wish I had one of those."
mm,
Things like that. So strangers comment on me a lot. And there's a kind of loss of boundaries. The only other group that I know that experiences that are highly visibly pregnant women,
Mm.
where people ask you what do you want and when do you do and other kinds of personal questions. So I find I get personal questions just out and about going into the public venue. Then, of course, I do want to say it is not easy being disabled. There are a lot of things that often come with it. I experience pain. Most profoundly, I experience fatigue. Disability fatigue is not like, oh, I need a good night's sleep. It's more like if I've left something in the kitchen, it's going to stay there because
Mm.
I can't go get it. That kind of fatigue, where a decision to maybe go to something, a dinner on a Friday night, means I better not be doing much on Saturday. Constantly making decisions to do A means not doing B.
As you were talking, what it made me think about is the extra energy that it takes to navigate the world and how the world isn't set up so that you're able to navigate it. It's a privilege for people who are able that create barriers and obstacles for you that take extra energy to then actually have to navigate in your daily life.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, I did a study of Alliant students across the different campuses and asked, how does your disability affect you? And 75% of them said cognitive fatigue. Even when their disability isn't one that causes physical fatigue, that extra calling everywhere before you go to make sure it's accessible and monitoring your own symptoms. And all of this leads to cognitive fatigue.
So, you have now talked about some of the attitudes, some of the barriers, and you've written and spoken extensively about the intersection of disability and psychotherapy. What do you wish every therapist understood about working with clients with disabilities?
I think there's a few things. One is that disability isn't the only thing that defines me. I have intersectional identity. I'm also female. I'm also a certain age. I'm also Jewish. There are other things. And not letting disability so overwhelm the therapist that they see nothing but that we really have to ask all those other questions about other identities. The other thing I wish is about that invisibility, that the things I have to deal with as a person with a disability are going to be mostly hidden to the therapist. And the therapist isn't automatically going to know about those. And so there needs to be further questioning, and that's why I developed disability affirmative therapy. What are those questions that you need to ask to truly understand the role of disability in someone's life so that you're not overinflating it, but you're not also underestimating it? And if I had one wish for therapists, it would be that they become allies, that people with disabilities are tired and we need more allies in the field of clinical and counseling and mental health. And if they could find other ways in their various roles to be a disability ally, it's very helpful.
So I know a lot of people oftentimes have gone into the field because we do want to be of help to people. What would it look like for someone to be a disability ally? What could they practically do, I guess, as an ally?
Well, one is very simple. Are you wheelchair accessible in your office? Could you please put that on your website? What that shows is some amount of disability awareness, just like we might ask somebody, what are your pronouns? And it shows that we have some awareness that some people don't use binary pronouns. Just saying if you're wheelchair accessible would be helpful and would save clients a phone call. Training your staff on how to interact with a new client with disability. Being aware of disability issues before someone brings them to your
Hmm.
awareness. Thinking about them in the different roles. Not assuming that your supervisees with disabilities cannot be therapists or going to have a lot of issues with their clients around their disability. These are all different ways in each person's venue that they can be allies.
In terms of organizations and being allies, what could organizations do in terms of their own perspective and actions in this arena?
Well, the first thing is to realize that for every employee who identifies as a person with disabilities and asks for an accommodation, there are 2 employees who have not. All the literature on disclosure in the workplace suggests that this is still the case very much. And in professions like medicine, law, mental health, it's probably even a slightly worse ratio because people who want to be seen as professionals in these fields, there is a lot about those fields that tells them that they're the consumer, not the provider. And so we have to assume that there are many, many people who have not disclosed disabilities, which means that as employers or as workplaces, we need to infuse universal design as much as possible, not only into the building and the physical locale, but into our policies and procedures.
And then I guess I'm wondering at the societal level, what would be ways that we could address these disparities?
Well, as you know, I started out trying to change the world.
Mhm. That's why I'm asking. I would think you would have some thoughts about it.
Um, really, disability has to be incorporated in every single thing we do, in every plan, in every building, in every policy. We have to think, is there going to be a differential impact on people with disabilities? How can we incorporate universal design? There are many structures that seem antithetical to disability affirmative practices. If, for example, you have a child with a disability, there are at least 8 different systems that you're going to have to access. And not only are they not coordinated, they seem to be counter to each other. And the funding for disability is very, very poor. One small example: has Alliant University put aside 1% of its budget for disability accommodation? It has a budget for the students. It doesn't have a budget for the faculty or the staff, which means if you ask for something that's costly, any employer is not going to want to do that because they haven't budgeted for it. That's the kind of thing where what I mean by invisibility,
Mhm.
which is, "Oh, it's a surprise. We need some money for an accommodation." So better funding, much more coordination across agencies, more actual help for both parents with disabilities and parents of children with disabilities, and more agency for consumers. And I'll give an example what I mean by agency. When I first needed a wheelchair, I couldn't go to a store, try out 20 wheelchairs, and figure out which I wanted. I first went to my primary care physician, said I need a wheelchair. She wrote up a prescription. That sent me to an occupational therapist. The occupational therapist decided what were the features I needed in a wheelchair. She then wrote the prescription, and because of who my insurance was, sent it to the one place that took my insurance. That one place had only 3 different kinds of wheelchairs, and because I'm 5 feet, only one of them met my needs, and that was the wheelchair I got. And then I paid more to get a more comfortable seat because, oh my, why would I need a comfortable seat? So that wasn't part of what insurance would pay for. So in that process, I don't have agency at all over
Mhm.
something that's going to become a part of my body.
So really limiting you in terms of your choices, in terms of options, and even what is covered under your insurance.
Exactly.
That just again makes it that much harder to be able to do your daily life.
Exactly. And that somebody who hasn't done this would never know about.
I know we tried to talk about privilege, and that is the privilege of people that are able-bodied, right? You don't have to think about this. You don't have to, deal with the barriers and obstacles, nor do you have to think about them. So I'm gonna have you kind of think about you having a magic wand. And we're gonna do a little bit of dreaming of you designing the world so it is more inclusive, and what would that look like physically, socially, and psychologically?
So, most of the funding for disability issues goes towards prevention of disabilities and cure for current disabilities. And some of that is very important. But one of the sayings in the disability community is care, not cure.
Hmm.
There's not as much funding for those who have disabilities. And we are never, ever going to eradicate disability. It has been throughout time and always will be. It is a part of humanity. So we need to think about how do we build a world that accommodates disability? How do we do better care for those who already have disabilities? And so I would reprioritize some of the funding towards care.
Mm.
So an example is you have a baby and because of your disability, you cannot lift the baby. And we all know that, early childhood, it's all about lifting the baby into something, out of something, into the car, out of the car,
Mhm.
etc. And you have a personal assistant. The personal assistant that the state has paid for is not allowed to do anything for the baby other than pick it up and bring it to you. It cannot feed the baby. It cannot change the diaper of the baby. It cannot do any baby care. So the baby is going to be taken away. Why can't we fund somebody that helps for those early childhood years, after which you can be a perfectly fine parent? Why are we not funding more help for the mother of a baby that's born with a disability to help her coordinate the different services that she's going to have to access? When that child starts school, we're going to call the needs of that child special. The child has special needs, and we're creating a mindset where the needs of people with disabilities are special, not routine, not every day. And I would want, with my magic wand, to change the mindset to say, how are we going to accommodate 20% of our population? What can we do? How can we infuse universal design everywhere? It is not special, it is routine.
Yeah, and as you were talking, even that word special means it's extra, it's outside normal or ordinary. And so it sets up already this expectation like we're having to do something additional as
For
opposed.
you,
Exact.
yes.
You have been a trailblazer for sure, particularly in psychology. I know this has been an area that you have been dedicated to and have been working on to get the field informed. So, what would you want your legacy to be?
Big question. I have a couple of thoughts about that. There's a field called disability studies. It started in Leeds, England. In disability studies, it's very interdisciplinary. It's got anthropology and philosophy and social psychology and everything except clinical psychology. I would hope that I have helped to infuse disability studies into clinical work. In San Francisco campus, we have graduated over 100 different students with disabilities. And so I hope that part of my legacy is that each of those goes out as a professional with a disability and starts to change the face of psychology. And the third thing is, if I can be so bold, are my books. And each of them tried to address a slightly different audience. So the first book, What Psychotherapists Should Know About Disability, was trying to say, here I am an outsider, yet I'm also a psychologist. Let me tell you from that insider perspective what it's like, what you need to know about disability. And then the second book, Disability-Affirmative Therapy, was really for clinicians. It's a much more clinical book. Here's how you work with someone with a disability. And the third book, Teaching Disability, that was for all of those people who have to teach diversity courses and have no idea what to do when it comes to disability. And I wrote 36 different activities that you could do with students to try to help teach them from an insider perspective about disability. So it might change how they think about disability. And the one that's coming out now from APA is a guide to building a disability affirmative practice. And that's the nuts and bolts. How do I start? What does it mean to have an accessible office? How do I think about intersectionality? What's the intersection of age and disability? How do I think about the beginning of clinical work? What are the simple steps I can do in my own practice? What about if I'm a supervisor? What about if I'm an instructor? Because we know most clinicians don't read the professional literature. They don't have time. So I actually wrote the book in such a way that you can pick it up and go to the one chapter you need and not have to go from beginning to end. Of course, I want people to read from beginning to end, but I really wrote it with that in mind, which is you're not going to become expert, you're not going to have competence, but I want to help you have cultural humility when it comes to disability. And that was the design of that book.
So making it user friendly and also knowing how busy professionals are, being practical in terms of that. What gives you hope right now in terms of the disability rights movement and mental health?
My hope is that we are turning out more professionals with disabilities, and I see them. I see how they have energy. I see that they grew up after laws were passed and they've come to take their rights for granted. And when they don't have them, they're more upset and mad and energized. And that's great. I feel really happy about the number of students that we've graduated with
Mm.
disabilities. So they are younger, they have new energy, they are starting to infuse the field. That gives me a lot of hope. They are writing about it in professional ways that was simply non-existent when I was coming of age in the field. So it's already starting to change, and I am proud of all the students that we've graduated who then many of them went into certain disability work and are starting to change the face of the profession. That's what gives me hope.
Wonderful. I mean, all your work and your mentoring of students kind of is that investment, which then will impact, the accumulation of all these different people and professionals will then slowly, the accumulation of all their impact will make change. And that sounds like that's a part of your hope. All right. So last question. What would you want some key takeaways for the audience today? I know we didn't even tap all of your expertise in this short time, but what would be key takeaways that would be critical?
One is that disability is not a dirty word.
Mm,
There's a movement within the disability community to say not person with disability, but disabled people. Just
okay.
like we wouldn't say a man who has gayness, we'd say a gay male. That I'm a disabled person, it's not a dirty word. That I am not a tragedy. That disability is hard. It's partly hard because the world makes it hard, but it's also hard to be disabled. But I am not a tragedy, and people with disabilities are not a tragedy. Third, and this is something that psychology has really promulgated, which is that I don't have to go through the 5 stages of grief in order to adjust to disability. I don't have an adjustment to disability, I have a response to disability, and that response changes all the time as I age, as I'm in different venues, and so let's not think anymore about stages of mourning and grief, but rather, what is your response to the disability at any given time? And then lastly, it will always be here. Let's get used to it.
Right. I mean, I really take that to heart And we'll remember that. Dr. Olkin, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your lived experience, and your unwavering commitment to making the world more inclusive. Your insights today have not only deepened our understanding of disability, but reminded us that empathy without action is incomplete. And I'm going to say to everyone listening, let's carry Dr. Olkin's message forward that disability is not a dirty word nor a deficit, but a dimension of human diversity. And it deserves respect, representation, and radical inclusion. So with that, we will end today's episode. Until next time, remember, wellness is a journey, not a destination. Please take care, and we'll see you next time.